Hi, welcome to She Spice. Vocalist Jaguar R. Wright is added once more, and as in her standard confrontational temperament, she's not keeping anything down, spilling hot tea that has burned a couple of superstars. The succinct vocalist, who is known for her hazardous disclosures, has gotten into another tricky situation, uncovering the foul, squalid, and clouded side of the music business. Her most recent disclosures have added one more layer of intricacy to the bits of gossip and schemes, encompassing the death of America's dear young lady Whitney Houston Wright, whose most loved subjects are Jay-Z, and Diddy has set her sights on individual vocalist BJ and his part in the death of Whitney Houston. How did Jaguar Wright associate BJ with the destruction of Houston, and which different big names did she embroil in her drawn-out uncover? Sit back as I regaled you with Puma Wright's new disclosures and took you back into history to analyze the conditions encompassing Houston's demise. BJ was the last individual to see her alive. He let the seller in, yet she was clear-headed, and yet he let the vendor in. He tried it out, assuming Diddy's new hardships and exhibitions. Josie has shown us one thing, the music business beside the brilliant lights. The style and the fabulousness have a fairly dull part that the existence out of its supporters. Such countless individuals have forfeited a ton for the business, however, have been left with nothing what's more. Dupes since certain elites and puppeteers are exploiting them, the double dealing seems to appear as mentorship, which later transformations into a Goliath beast that gobbles up the mentees entire. To this end, a couple of big names like Jaguar Wright have chosen to uncover the ills of the business. So the exploiters would be brought to book. They likewise expect to edify and teach new and impending craftsmen about the risks of the business. So they are arranged. Puma's dangerous disclosures have driven her to claim some wild stuff about Diddy and Jay-Z. This time, her spotlight is on R&B vocalist BJ for the supposed job he played in the destruction of Whitney Houston during one of her meetings. Jaguar Wright suggested that BJ was paid to stop Whitney Houston at the lodging. Now, this is wild given that no significant media source has at any point conveyed any fresh insight about the day in or around the inn in which Whitney died. The nearest beam really was to the scene, as conveyed by the significant sensationalist newspapers, was on the ground floor of the inn when a group of police officers and paramedics prevented him from seeing Whitney anyway. Puma Wright appears to have an alternate rendition of the occasions encompassing the vocalist's downfall, and in her form, BJ contributed to it. Portraying her story, she guaranteed that BJ was the last individual to see Whitney after some deer had strolled in to supply her with merchandise, so it was conceivable that the one-wish artist managed the last blow that put Whitney to an extremely durable rest prior to putting her face first in the tub. His objective was to make what seemed to be the downfall of the "I will continuously adore you" vocalists appear as though it was a mishap afterwards. Liquor strolled in and saw Houston's dormant body, but did nothing since she had sworn loyalty to Clive Davis. Her portrayal claimed that Clive was the driving force behind Houston's downfall. 2 days earlier, he had a battle with her within sight of Houston's little girl, Bobby Christina. She didn't portray the reason for the battle, however, yet trust connivance scholars to interface a couple of specs and give a concise image of what happened that evening. Strangely, Jaguar Wright isn't the main individual to have formally scrutinized the authority report on Whitney's end, as indicated by a private examiner, Paul Hubble. Whitney Houston owed a huge load of cash to certain rulers, and they sent 2 people to show her something new. He proceeded with saying that those folks incidentally cut Whitney's life off during a fight, leaving her face down in the tub. However, Jaguar Wright, to a great extent, concurs with that story. She feels that BJ was in some way or another involved and was presumably paid by Clive Davis to commit the devious demonstration. The confidential specialist highlighted a few occurrences in the authority coroner's report as support for his presumptions. For instance, the coroner's report showed that Whitney's hands and arms gave a few indications of battle, which Hubble deciphers to be a fight among her and her assailant. He, likewise, guaranteed that the water in which the vocalist coincidentally suffocated was as yet hot at the time the paramedics arrived at the scene, which is dubious. Consequently, he concluded that the water was as sizzling hot before the artist died, and that not so much as an individual high on cocaine would endeavor to sit in that water. At last, He highlighted the singing imprints at the lower back of Whitney as evidence of the water's high temperature at that point of the artist's passing anyway. He avoided naming anybody as the brains, rather he faulted the rulers for the vocalist passing anyway. As we've previously shown, Puma Wright thinks the artist was killed by Beam J under the bearing of Liv Davis, and here's the reason she believes that Whitney was more productive to Clive Davis when she was UN alive than alive, and that Beam J succumbed to Clive's commitment to resuscitating his music vocation at the time Beam J was involved with Whitney. In spite of the fact that he was way more youthful than her, the age contrast was 18 years. Consequently, many fans suspect Beam J was in for the cash, not for genuine love. They felt that the young fellow, who was in his 30s at the time, was exploiting Whitney's weakness. The two met when Whitney was faltering from an unpleasant separation with her ex, Bobby Brown. The meddlesome cameras of paparazzi caught them on a couple of dates at top-of-the-line cafes and large projects. However, they rejected that they were a thing. Rather, they favored the equitable companions tag so they could keep on partaking in their sentiment away from the sharp focal points of writers around a similar time. Beam J was noted for the erotic tape with Kim Kardashian that carried her into the spotlight. Beam was a striving performer then, having delivered 2 or 3 tunes and collections, but not raising a ruckus around town. It was expected that countless fans believed that Beam's entrance into Whitney's life was to restore his profession and focus on himself, particularly after the calamity of the sexy video with Kim Kardashian. Others felt that Rye was planted by Clive Davis to assume an evil part in the entire show. As I expressed before, Rye was on an unlucky streak and could successfully endure the extreme universe of being a melodic craftsman. In this way, it is conceivable that he acknowledged the occupation from Clive Davis with a commitment that he would get worldwide openness and, in the end, cash to get his vocation rolling, so the fans guaranteed that the youthful Beam J found an approach to establishing himself in the existence of Whitney. Many even put him as the most notable love of all vocalists on an allegation that he denied energetically. The equivalent allegation was evened out against Bobby Earthy, Whitney's ex, all through their turbulent marriage, which frequently rankled him as his ex. Karen Stephen once recounted an episode where Bobby lashed out as a result of the consistent association with Whitney's utilization. Sway's huge thing was that everybody faulted him for her destruction. However, when he met her, she was utilizing him. He generally felt extremely furious about that. He let me know what everyone saw wasn't the genuine Whitney. He generally said her confidential persona, which you saw on the unscripted TV drama Bobby Brown, was who she truly was at any rate. An affirmed relationship with the I Focus on You vocalist went on with the pair spotted 8 days before Whitney's end at the inn. As per sources, both Beam and Clive purportedly intended to have Beam reduce most, if not all, connection with Whitney 7 days before they did their devious demonstration. This move was to stay away from doubt when the deed was at last done. They co-marked Puma Freedoms, making sense of that. Beam slipped into the inn inconspicuous and professed to come invest some energy with, when you accept vocalist Beam then, at that point, permitted the sellers that the confidential agent talked about into Whitney's room, and they beat her up when they understood she was far gone. They organized the scene to make it seem as though the vocalist had ended her own life and escaped the lodging. Beam J then returned to his home in time before liquor got to the scene in the organization of Whitney's associate. Then, when he heard the fresh insight about his sweetheart's death, Beam J hurried from his home back to the crime location, professing to really focus on Whitney to trick each and every individual who was observing this, while Clive Davis was having a good time with his companions and industry partners at a similar lodging in Beverly Slopes, while his mentee was battling for her lifetime. He coach was celebrating the night away. This caused a commotion with fans asking why Clive would party, while Whitney was being killed in similar setting. In this manner, they finished up. It was maybe a celebratory signal to commend the large numbers of cash that was going to be made. Fans knew that Whitney's death could bring out compassion and sympathy among the overall population, making them disparage her tunes, and they were correct. Whitney Houston's end evoked a feeling of compassion in many fans, causing them to belittle her collection. The deals created for Whitney's domain, and eventually Clive Davis ran into a huge number of dollars. A few sensationalist newspapers contended that the cash Whitney's bequest produced using the artist's downfall, was more than all she made when she was alive. Clive Diva post-arrangement had worked out as expected. He figured out how to recover all the. Subscribe She Spice for more videos.